quip, I think maybe it went back to C. Wright Mills, I don't recall, that the United States is a one-party state, business party, with two factions, the Democrats and the Republicans, which are different. It's not entirely true anymore. It's still a one-party state, the business party, but there's only one faction, and it's not Democrats. It's moderate Republicans. The people who are, the Democratic Party today is overwhelmingly what used to be called moderate Republicans. Meanwhile, the Republican Party, so-called, has just drifted totally off the spectrum. They're not part of the parliamentary system anymore. That's actually recognized by the most prestigious conservative commentators. So, for example, Norman Ornstein, famous conservative political analyst, or American Enterprise Institute, right-wing. He simply describes the Republican Party today as a radical insurgency, which has abandoned parliamentary principles. And you can see it in the last 8 years. Their only policies have been, of course, to enrich the super rich and to block anything that's done in Washington, period. That's been very successful, remarkably successful. This report came out, I think, yesterday in the New York Times of the looking at recent polls on this, and they're very interesting. Turns out that talking about the midterm elections that are coming up, there are a lot of polls about it. The public largely supports the policies of the Democrats, which the Democrats themselves don't support, but the supposed, like higher taxes on the rich and Medicare and so on. Public supports those. At the same time, the public prefers the Republicans. And when you looked at the reasons, it's because the public is infuriated about what's called dysfunctional Washington. Now, the press is always talking about this, gridlock in Washington, dysfunctional Washington. Dysfunctional Washington means the Republicans are committed to block anything that happens. Okay, so it's dysfunctional Washington, blamed on Democrats. Public prefers the Republicans, but opposes their policies. Okay, this is really clever politics. It makes people believe there's a political system. People are driven into acting in extremely irrational ways. It's not the first time. So, for example, in 2012 elections, there were polls, a ton of polls go on, very interesting, on attitudes towards policy issues and towards political preferences. And it's striking to see how they separate. So, for example, one major study of Southern Tea Party people, that category, people identify themselves that way. Most of them are social democrats. They support higher spending on health, on education, on aid to the poor, not welfare, because Reagan demonized that, but aid to the poor, things like that. But higher taxes on the rich. But at the same time, they support the Republican Party, which is exactly the opposite. It's you take a place like, actually, there was a study of California recently, which investigated attitudes towards what they call big government, taxes and stuff. There was a very close correlation between the amount of aid that people got from the federal government and their opposition to the federal government. So when you get to the rural, poor areas, they're getting an awful lot of aid from the federal government, and they want to get the government off their backs. To try to instill these kinds of attitudes into people is a real achievement. And that's still, to get back to your first point, to the 99%. You can overcome this. This is not like fighting the secret police. You don't get thrown into prisons for getting people to understand these things. This is an opportunity for real organizing work, which can be done.